Come back. We continue now with your reporting on the newsfeed late night. Every year, there are numerous allegations of police brutality in South Africa, with a number of deaths and injuries attributed to law enforcement. Now, a new investigation by an accountability journalism project, Viewfinder, says the killings and brutality are enabled by the reluctance to discipline officers accused of wrongdoing in these cases. The organization says this impunity emboldens officers to repeat their actions, creating a never-ending vicious cycle. Let's find out a little bit more now from Viewfinder editor Daniel Knutzer. Daniel, good evening and thank you very much for your time. Your investigation picking up a pattern of abuse. Just take us through what you have collected as evidence.
Thank you so much for having me. Well, this investigation's been 2 years in the making. We bring out stories on this topic once in a while. Our focus to date has been IPID, the police watchdog that conducts these investigations, but we've really broadened our scope to look at the whole accountability oversight mechanism for police in South Africa. And what we've found is that that system is so dysfunctional, actually, that it's fairly easy and fairly often done for senior police officers to thwart IPID investigations and disciplinary recommendations against officers that have been accused, investigated, and recommended for discipline for very serious transgressions around the misuse of force. And I guess the main finding, the main takeaway is that even when IPID investigates and makes recommendations against police officers, it is possible, and it is often done, that police management do not enforce those recommendations through proper disciplinary action, proper disciplinary convictions, and indeed proper sanctions, which are disincentives or ensure that police officers do not become problem officers and reoffenders if, in fact, there's a penchant for misuse of force within a particular sector of the police service.
So the IPID then recommends disciplinary action against police. What happens to those recommendations? Are they just simply put in a file and shelved and forgotten about?
Well, we can speak at length about the incompatibilities between IPID systems and what's called the SAPS disciplinary regulations. But in effect, what happens is a number of things other than police officers actually being put through an expeditious disciplinary process. One thing that might happen, for instance, is SAPS might appoint new investigating officers to duplicate and redo IPID's investigation from scratch. A really absurd custom, a practice which has been raised in Parliament over the last number of years, in a loophole which it seems hasn't been closed. These investigations, if they happen to then make exculpatory findings against police officers, those would supersede the findings of an independent watchdog. It's a systemic flaw, but I think it's also one that is rooted in a lack of leadership and a lack of enthusiasm, as borne out by the police's own statistics on discipline, as showing a sharp decline in recent years within the police service and the police management itself. I can speak about other things that happen, but I would ask for you to prompt me or to ask another question.
Let's talk about IPID's constraints then. What are its constraints and limitations? For example, as you're saying, there's lack of clarity regarding the cases or the results of the cases and what actually happens as far as the disciplinary verdicts are concerned. There's lack of clear information on what actually happens, even with some of the missing cases, so it seems. I mean, what are the limitations and constraints on IPID?
So this investigation has come a long way, and the original focus of the investigation was indeed IPID, both externally imposed challenges such as resourcing. IPID only has one, sometimes two provincial officers in any given province, which means in a place like the Eastern Cape, where part of my investigation was focused, that 12 investigators essentially have to cover the entire rural vastness. That long distances is just one of the resource kind of constraints that they have. Large caseloads, big backlogs, and a lot of internal dysfunctions. IPID's investigations are often poor, even though they complete these and report them as performance statistics. But the focus of this new investigation really is on police management itself. And I think what we found is both that there are regulatory and legal loopholes that are easily exploited by senior police officers to protect violence and brutality accused colleagues from consequence, even when IPID has, against these incredible odds, completed investigations thoroughly and made recommendations. The consequence, of course, is that these officers, problem officers, I might add, are recycled back into communities to become a scourge on those communities instead of serving them as they should.
Yeah. What is also coming out here is a clear sign of low sanctions. For example, one of the stories that you were following is that of the killing of Pindile Ramncwane, who was the police officer was convicted, but it says here only 2 months of his pay was suspended, but he kept his job.
That's correct. In fact, there were 6 police officers brought for a disciplinary hearing for this assault case, which allegedly happened at a police station. It was a drunken, disorderly arrest of a man, and he was, according to eyewitnesses, very brutally assaulted and died from internal injuries a short while later. That's the case study I chose to focus on. And what happened in that disciplinary hearing was, even in spite of eyewitness accounts and evidence that this particular police station had a pattern of these kind of assaults, 5 of the members were acquitted. 1, yes, was convicted in the disciplinary hearing, but the sanction was a 2-month suspension without pay. I've subsequently confirmed that that police officer is still on duty. A criminal case of murder has not yet been brought against these 5 or 6 police officers. But that mirrors a broader problem within the police of low sanctions. Often disciplinary convictions are seen as a measure of accountability for observers of police oversight in South Africa. What I think our investigation has uncovered is that very often disciplinary convictions can give the impression that justice is taken.
Daniel, unfortunately, that line letting us down there. We're going to have to leave it there for today. Editor of Viewfinder and Accountability Journalism Project, Daniel Knut. Let's take